I think there's plenty of people out there who don't want God to exist. That's why I asked the question, if Christianity were true, would you become a Christian?
Absolutely.
And many atheists have been honest enough to say no. They don't want God to exist.
If the Christian God is believed to be a personal God who wants to have a relationship with people, wants people to turn to him, why does he leave so much room to doubt his existence? I think that this is an issue that most people struggle with to some extent or another.
Yeah, and it relates to what we call the hiddenness of God.
Yeah.
Right? Soren Kierkegaard, many years ago, was a Danish philosopher who had written a number of books, and he gave an illustration that I think makes a lot of sense. He says, imagine a prince in a given jurisdiction sees in his jurisdiction a beautiful young woman who is a peasant. And as soon as he sees her, he immediately falls in love with her. But he knows that if he goes to her as the prince, with his chariots, his guards, his horses, the trumpets, the whole deal, she may just fall for his power and not really love him. So he goes to his father, the king, and he says, I love this woman. I saw her from a distance, Father. How do I win her hand in marriage? And the father says, son, the only way you can know that she really loves you for who you are, and the only way she will know that she really loves you for who you are and not your position, is if you renounce the throne and you go to her as a peasant. So he does. He renounces the throne. He gives up his riches. He goes into her village dressed as a peasant, and he wins her as a peer. That's what God does for us. He adds humanity to his deity. He comes into this earth. He allows the people that rebelled against him to brutally torture and kill him so he can win their hand. If he were to come the first time with his chariots, his horns, his guards, all his power, he might overwhelm us and we wouldn't have the ability to make a free choice. But since God comes the first time as a lamb to the slaughter, he gives us the ability to love him without overpowering us with his presence. Now, when he comes the second time, that's going to be the day of vengeance, the day of judgment. And that's when grace is going to be over. That's when, as C.S. Lewis said, when the author of the play walks on the stage, the play is over. And at some point, that's going to happen. We don't know when, but it will.
If I could ask a follow-up question
Sure.
to that, with I think 𝗦𝗢𝗕𝗦𝗢𝗕 would talk about the fact that, or this idea that if God wants us to know him and knows each of us personally, wouldn't he know what it would take to convince me personally that he is real? And
No,
why?
because, yeah, but I think the reason is because some people don't want to be convinced. I think there's plenty of people out there who don't want God to exist. That's why I asked the question, if Christianity were true, would you become a Christian?
Absolutely.
And many atheists have been honest enough to say no. They don't want God to exist. So I don't think it's not just a matter of head knowledge. It's a heart commitment. In fact, James, the half-brother of Jesus, who wrote that little book in the New Testament called?
James.
Thank you. He says even the demons believe that God exists, but they tremble. And this is, I didn't make this point in the presentation, I didn't have time, but there's a difference between belief that and belief in. Belief that is just intellectually knowing something is true. That's what we're doing here, apologetics, giving evidence for what you believe. But all the belief that in the world won't get your moral transgressions forgiven. For that, you've got to go from belief that to belief in.
Right.
And we know this in relationships. When I first met my wife 34 years ago, I got evidence that she would be a good wife, but all the evidence in the world didn't make her my wife. I had to take a step of trust in her to ask her to be my wife. And in a momentary lapse of judgment, she said yes. See? That's the difference between belief that and belief in. Belief that is of the head, but belief in is not just of the head, it's also of the heart. And so God is not going to force you to love him. He can't. That's a contradiction. All he can do is provide you with evidence and let you make up your own mind. But he's not going to overwhelm us with evidence. He's going to give us enough freedom to walk away. So I think there's enough evidence for you to know that Christianity is true. I also think God gives us enough freedom, enough distance for us to say, if I don't want God, I'm going my own way.